Core again. Oh,
we are live. Oh, I haven't played Crisis Core in so long. Oh, that game was fun. I loved it.
I bought the PSP for Crisis Core and I beat it, and PSP is collecting dust somewhere.
That is literally, I think, the only game I played on PSP, Crisis Core.
Yep, same here. Well, apparently they've re-released it on PlayStation 5. And
actually, I wonder if it's on. I wonder if it's on Steam. Sorry, keep going ahead.
Yeah, and so I'm thinking of replaying it, but I'm wondering if I should play Rebirth after I finish Remake. I'm like, there's 18 chapters in Remake. I just started 17, so I'm nearing the end. But again, I've not played in like a month. I barely play. Like I'd prefer to read. And I've got
Crisis Core is on Steam and it's off 50% right now. By the way, we are live and we tricked you. We tricked the audience. You thought this was going to be a review of Erick Ybarra and Petras's debate. It's actually just about video games. That's it. So sorry.
We got you guys.
Yep. All right. I am Father James and this is the Barely Protestant YouTube channel. I wonder, do you hear me all right when I'm stepping further away, like over here? Is there a huge difference?
I mean, I can hear you perfectly. Can you hear me perfectly?
Yep, perfectly. Once again, I have to thank my friends who got this for me. It's a wonderful setup. And we finally have, I got to show this. We finally have, you're the first one, Allan, and this is your first time on the channel. We finally have the Ethernet cable. So I don't have to rely upon my really bad Wi-Fi at the church because it's so far away from the box, whatever that box is called. So you should not be seeing any sort of hiccups or anything on my side. So yeah.
Oh, wonderful. Yeah, no, this is my first time on your channel because I've been on like we've collabed before, but it's always been on my channel or John Fisher's channel. So yeah, I'm happy to join you for the first time here on Barely Protestant.
Awesome. Well, yeah, definitely glad to have you here. So yeah, check out the other stuff we've done, especially check out his channel. I'm very jealous of you to this day because James White called you, what did he call you, like insufferable or something like that on the dividing line?
He's called me a few things actually.
Yeah.
But I mean, he's called me a papist, but I mean, you call me a papist. I mean,
I call you papist.
A lot of people call me papist.
And by the way, I'm never going to be offended if anyone calls me an Henrician. I don't care. Like I honestly, I kind of prefer it because I rather us be like, okay, this is what we kind of think of you as or whatever. And I don't even think, I won't even take offense to it. Yeah.
Well, I think if you remember our response to Michael Corrin, I titled that video "The Henrician Papist Alliance Against Michael Corrin."
Oh my goodness, that was good times. Yeah. Anyway, sorry. Go ahead. What were you saying before about James White and all?
Well, yeah, he's calling me a few things. I'd have to go and check that back because I mean, I was calling him out for his inconsistency. Like when he debates a Muslim and they quote like some far left Christian scholar.
Yeah.
And like he does that against Catholics too. I mean, and he's like, well, you know, your magisterium hasn't condemned them, and it's like, well, yeah, but why are you using them? You know, I mean, it's a huge double standard on his And he tries to call out the Muslims for double standard. So I'm like, well, you know, you're doing the same thing. And James White today, it's kind of sad what's happened to him. He does not have a lot of friends. Like even the Reformed Baptists are turning on him.
Yeah.
It's like it's him, Jeff Durbin, and I talked to a Reformed Baptist I know who's in my province, who's part of the pro-life movement because I'm heavily involved in that. And I'm like, what does everyone hate James White? And he's like, I don't know. You know, a few years ago when he was in the States, he bought James White dinner, a bunch of friends of him. Like they happened to be somewhere close where James White was speaking at a conference, and they offered to buy him dinner, and they all talked to him. And I don't know. Just I don't know. He seems to be. Sam Shamoon is always picking on him, but you know.
Well, I've had my own run-ins with Sam Shamoon, and he's an odd one. I'll say that. I don't know if you guys are close or anything, but he's
well,
yeah.
we did some things together like a few years ago, and you know, we'll send like each other a couple texts every 6 months. You know, we're not super close, but he kind of likes the fact that I know a lot about the Crusades and stuff.
Yeah.
So, but we're not here to talk about James White or the Crusades or
which
sad
are evil. The Crusades are evil according to James White, because, you know, how dare we free Christians from Mohammedans. But anyway, yeah, we're not here to talk about that. We're here to talk about Erick Ybarra and Ubi Petras's debate, which I was only able to go through once. And what I'm going to do for this, just to let everybody know, I'm going to let Allan Ruhl take the lead on this, especially since he's the better historian. And I'm going to give my comments on this as we're going through it. But first, we're going to talk about what the format. Here. How about you let us know how we're going to go through this?
Well, I wanted to talk about the format. I think that's important because there seems to be a lot of papacy debates going on. If you remember, just a few months ago, Pine Sap and Luigi had a papacy debate, and it's like, does the papacy exist in the first millennium or something? And it was a very short debate, and the format I thought was absolutely atrocious. I mean, like, for me personally, I've not ever done like a moderated debate. I had kind of a back and forth with Trulia once on the Council of Lateran 649, if that you know, proves Vatican I in the first millennium or something like that. And I think that's like 1,000 years is a long time. So I don't think you can just have a debate on 1,000 years. I mean, you have to take an episode or a small period of church history and focus on that. And that is what this debate with Petras and Ybarra did. And I thought it was perfect. It was a long debate, 3 hours. And they focused on the period from the Council of Chalcedon to essentially Constantinople.
Hormisdas.
Yeah, and the stuff in between, and all the stuff in between. And so I thought you had two very intelligent, highly studied people focusing on this one, about a century, 451 to 553, so 102 years. So about a century. And of course, everything in between there, Acacian Schism, Hormisdas, all that stuff. So I was really happy about that. It may not have the same kind of soundbite effect that Pine Sap and Luigi had, but
I'm trying to remember. I don't think I actually saw that debate in its entirety. That one, the Luigi and Pine Sap one.
You can skip that one. I'm sorry, Pine Sap, Luigi. I have nothing against you guys, but that debate was yeah. I mean, I think.
Oh wait. Oh no, wait. Oh, Luigi. Oh wait. I think maybe I did see it. Maybe I thought it was. Maybe I didn't think it was Pine Sap. Anyway, but I think I did see it.
Yeah, it was late July or early August, something like that.
Because if it's the one I'm thinking of, I had him on my channel. Or was that
no?
A while
That's
back? Anyway,
the Voice of Reason debate.
Oh, that's right. That was the Voice of Reason one. Yeah, that's right. Okay.
Yeah. That debate pretty much has the same problem, but but like, I like the fact that it was focused on a very specific point in time. Because I mean, if you go back to like the Pine Sap versus Luigi, the debate, which happened to be much shorter, it was like the whole first millennium. And, you know, they're talking about Cyprian versus Stephen, then they're talking about Photius, and they're talking about Pope Leo, then they're talking about Vigilius. Like, it was all over the map, and it was just, in my opinion, two smart people. Like, Pine Sap and Luigi are smart people, but I think it was just a waste of time. They probably should have done what Erick and Ubi did and focused on, you know, a clip of history.
Yeah,
and
about 3 centuries or so.
Yeah, something like that. Just narrow it down, and I think you can get a lot more out of that, instead of this whole millennium, like 1,000 years is a long time to cover, I don't know. That was my opinion on the format. What do you think?
Yeah, I 1 second. All right. I really appreciated the format. Honestly, even with as much as they narrowed it down to just a few centuries, I still felt like we could have gone so much deeper into so many things. I think focusing it like if they just focused upon the tome of Saint Leo, right? I think and Chalcedon and all that sort of stuff right there, I think that would have been like maybe ideal, because sometimes you can get so much into the weeds with some of it that it's hard to put. It's like still too many. What's the phrase I'm looking for? Still sort of too many pots being cooked or whatever kind of thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
All right. So, the format was fine. I loved especially they had a cross-examination section and then a discussion session, which really can only work if you are friendly as far as the debaters are concerned. Otherwise you just have to have it as cross-examination the entire time. But I love that they had like a 55-minute discussion section. But yeah. Frad did a great job. He, very professional. The biggest problem, honestly, was the stupid parade that came by.
I remember that. Yeah, that was unfortunate.
Yeah. So, good. Good debate. Well done. Both sides, I think, did an excellent job. Erick, I've always said, has been definitely one of the better sort of modern YouTube. Not that he's exclusively YouTube or whatever, but like. Online Roman apologists, and Ubi has really put some excellent stuff out there too, I would say. What are your thoughts on both of them?
Well, first of all, I think Ubi won on the who was dressed better. I mean, he was dressed like a stud.
Oh yeah.
I'm like, wow, Ubi, man, what a stud, and he's been going on this whole time, I mean, if he did his YouTube videos like that, I mean, the guy looks like a legend. So both apologists are top notch in my opinion. I think Ubi focuses on the papacy, but he's talked about other things too. And I'm really impressed with his knowledge. Like just going through his website, I've done some occasional responses to his material, and he cites everything. It's so professional. He's very well read. And same with Erick. Erick's like extremely well read.
Yeah.
I think that like I felt almost stupid just listening to them. I'm like, wow.
Yeah.
I feel so dumb, But in all fairness, that's just not the part of church history I focus on. Like I'm more of like 7th
medieval
till the 12th century. Yeah. So like I focus on a different part. I'm sure if I debated someone on that century, on those centuries, I'd probably sound like Erick or Ubi there, hopefully. But yeah, so I mean I focus elsewhere. But yeah, no, I thought they were sharp. I can't think of either. Like I can't think of an example of anyone knowing more than Ubi and Erick on that part. Trulia, maybe.
By the way, the book that you've recommended before that I got, they did cite at least once or twice. Simmons, the Church Universal and the See of Rome. I think they did, or at least at the very least, they cited Simmons.
Simmons. Are you talking about Simmons or Jalland?
Henry Edward Simmons.
Okay, that's there's two books. There's Simmons and Jalland. They're right next to each other in my library over there.
Maybe I misheard, but I thought they cited Simmons.
Yeah, I think they did. I've talked to Erick about Simmons before. He's told me to buy that book, and I did.
Yeah.
Now, a thing we should all talk about is I mean, I guess as an Anglican, you'd be cheering for Ubi.
Well, yeah, essentially. I mean, I'm not going to agree with him on everything, but definitely much more of a conciliarist. Obviously, our ecclesiology, insofar as the structure is concerned, is going to be very similar.
So, where would you, in terms of the papacy, especially for the 5th and 6th centuries, because that was the area.
Yeah.
Where would you disagree with Ubi, say during the debate, or do you agree with pretty much everything he says?
I can't think of anything that I would substantially disagree with. I guess the only thing that I could think of just would be stuff like in the background. Given sort of the claimed infallibility of ecumenical councils and things like that. So I would obviously disagree on that. But I would still put I would put ecumenical councils on a level of authority to which they cannot be just easily dismissed, I would say. But I would not put them on a level of infallibility.
Okay. Because I know you, I mean, I've talked to this with you before, like your view of ecumenical councils. I think up to Chalcedon, you're a firm believer, but you start to get to like 6 and 7, you're like, nah, that's getting kind of late.
Not quite.
Okay.
It's more, I mean, the typical sort of thing is that we talk about the Christological clarifications in 5, 6, and 7, right?
Well, not 7. That's to do with icons.
But that's still that's based on Christology, though.
I guess it is, yeah.
Tangentially, it is, yeah. In fact, I think that like the whole point is that it's sort of in a sense a rejection of monophysitism. So, anyway, so 5, 6, and 7, like there are going to be points in specifically 7 that I will have issues with. But in general, the main thrust of the 7 ecumenical councils I will hold to.
All right. Okay, that's good. Yeah, no, that's good. Would all Anglicans share that view, or most?
No.
Okay.
I'll say this, within my communion, I'm with like the continuum and such. Like within our sort of tradition, like almost all will be like, yeah, 7 ecumenical councils. And maybe some qualifications about the 7th, mostly.
Yeah, that's receiving a lot of attention, these guys, you know, because Gavin Ortland did a lot of work on this, and I know Craig Trulia has countered, like, I know he recently worked on a documentary with someone. I still haven't watched it yet. He's like, he texted me, he's like, oh, you gotta watch it, you know. And I do gotta watch it, but I just, you know, it's Christmas time. I'm busy, right? You know, like you're busy at Christmas, right? It's hard to watch these 3-hour debates, but no, I think they're important because I mean, so in the 5th and 6th century, you probably wouldn't. You probably agreed pretty much with Ubi about almost everything, possibly some cosmetic details here or there.
Yeah, I mean, well, more just like maybe fundamental assumptions in the background that didn't really show up, you know?
Okay, like the view of ecumenical councils, like you said.
That's about it.
There's actually I would describe myself as an ecumenical council supremacist. I love ecumenical councils. Like, I think it's a great way for solving problems. And usually, I mean, ironically, Chalcedon was probably one of the most unsuccessful ecumenical councils out there, because it needed 2 more to kind of correct it, 553 and eventually 680, because that was promoting monothelitism, which is basically monophysitism,
one will,
in disguise. So if you think about it, Chalcedon is one of the most unsuccessful ecumenical councils of all time. But overall, I think ecumenical councils are very successful. They tend to solve issues fairly firmly. And like I'd say
Real quick, I have a question. I don't know if you would know the answer to this, but would the Diamond Brothers consider Vatican II to have started as an ecumenical council, or would they have said it was never an ecumenical council?
I think they would say it's never been an ecumenical council because they think they think Pius XII was the last pope.
Okay.
So there's been no pope since October 9th, 1958. And
Okay.
when Pope John 23rd was elected, I think October 28th of that month, 1958, he was an anti-pope, and there's been no pope since. And he's the one who called Vatican II, so Vatican II is not ecumenical. Yeah, there's an interesting debate on that because a lot of people say, now I've not read this, but people I trust have said this, that said that the Eastern Orthodox Saint Mark of Ephesus initially viewed Florence as an ecumenical council.
Oh, really? Huh.
But now I don't know. I've not read that myself, but people I trust have said that. So
really quick, sorry. There's a slight echo on of my voice on your side, just to let you know.
Okay, I'll try to move the okay, I'm just shutting down all the extra windows. I don't have it open. I don't hear just say something.
All right. So what is your least favorite ecumenical council, and what is your favorite ecumenical council?
I didn't hear an echo.
I don't hear. Yeah, I don't hear it anymore. All right.
Okay. Do you want me to answer that question?
Yeah.
Oh man, the thing is, I love ecumenical councils. Saint Robert Bellarmine, he's got an entire volume in defense of the papacy. Typical Catholics defending the papacy, but he has another volume just as big defending ecumenical councils and their authority and why they're authoritative. Okay, what's my favorite? Council of Nicaea, obviously. Florence, I love Florence. Constantinople III.
If I considered Florence to be ecumenical, it'd be my least favorite.
Well,
no, Vatican I actually would beat it, but yeah.
I don't know if I'd put Vatican I as my top favorite, but Nicaea, Florence. I'd say Nicaea. I like Chalcedon, but in hindsight, you take a look at history, it needed a lot of patchwork. It didn't solve, and it solved it on paper. It didn't solve it in practice. So okay, I'd say a three-way tie between Nicaea, Constantinople III, Florence. Trent would be a close successor, but I'd say it's a notch below those three. Again, it's from what I consider to be ecumenical. My least favorite councils. I don't like the way Constantinople 553 was conducted. I think Erick Ybarra has historically said, that's used. That council is used a lot against papal authority, but is that how you want to run a church? That was not really conciliar at all. It was Caesaro-Papist on steroids.
Wait, Constantinople 3, is that
no, Constantinople 553. So Constantinople 2.
I thought you said 3.
No,
okay, so so Vigilius. Okay, Vigilius.
Yeah. Okay. So that's probably my least. Of course, I agree with the contents of it. But I think it's unfortunate it had to be that way. Because that's not how and if you take a look at the post-schism East, that is Bush League Caesaro-Papism compared to what they have. Just no one studies it, so no one knows it, right?
Yeah.
You got the emperor deciding doctrine, you got the patriarchs disagreeing. He's like, I'm going to remove you as patriarch, put my friend in charge.
Yeah.
Oh, he agrees with me. Okay, problem solved.
Yeah.
So
both East and West have that, definitely.
Yeah, and well, it's
and Anglicanism. We have that too.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
yeah. Well, that kind of started you guys off, you know. I mean, with the king. Yeah, and
One his annulment.
yeah, yeah, yeah. There we go. Yeah, no, I talked about him on Twitter the other day because it was the anniversary of his excommunication. I'm like, oh yeah, I should put this up. I know that because there was a girl I know. It was her birthday. I said, oh, happy birthday. It's like, oh yeah, your birthday's on this day, you know.
And I commented on that, if I recall correctly.
Yeah,
I said, like,
yeah, you did.
He was based or something.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, we've talked about the format, the relevance. Do you want to talk about we've talked about the two debaters, Ubi and Erick?
Yeah.
Is there something you want to talk about next, or do you want to?
Yeah. So, I'll say this. I think that maybe it's my bias coming in, but I do think Ubi did ultimately win. I felt that his case was stronger. I don't think that it was some sort of clear sub-papist and semi-papist. Yeah, I'm definitely a semi-papist, yes. I don't think that his that Erick was like blown out of the water in the least at all. I don't even think it was like a sort of a knockdown win or anything like that. I just think he's sort of slightly edged over Erick on the debate. What are your thoughts?
Well, as to who won, again, people look at these things differently, but I'll say this. Like, I was happy with how my side presented the information. I'm glad that, like, I thought, like, I'm happy with how the debate went for my side. Am I going to claim it as a victory? I guess you could say that, but I don't think of it that way. I just think I'm glad we had, my side had a good showing.
Yeah.
I don't think anyone's going to change sides because of this debate. I don't think anyone's going to go in either direction, even if they do think their guy won. I don't like you said you thought Ubi won, but you didn't think it was like a KO punch, right? You thought it was
maybe a TKO.
TKO, interesting.
Yeah. That's where technical knockout, right? Is that?
Yeah, technical knockout. Yeah.
I don't watch boxing much at all or anything like that, so.
Okay. You don't
a slight edge over.
Okay.
Yeah, a slight edge over.
Okay. Well, in that case, it's you'd probably say they went to the judge's scorecard, you know, after.
That's what I mean. Yeah. That's
and, you know, it was, 8-4, 7-5, whatever, rounds for.
Yeah.
It was like Floyd Mayweather versus Juan Manuel Marquez or something, you know. All right. I know I got these from Erick, believe it or not. He always uses sports analogies in.
Oh, nice.
In nice. It's like, well, with Pope and Julius, we get knocked down, but we beat the count. That's what he says. Okay. So what do you think was Ubi's strongest point that you think that Erick, that he got Erick on then?
Well, first of all, I think rhetorically, one of the best lines in it was when Ubi brought up the I can't remember exactly how it was brought up, but mentioning sort of like the accumulation of power into this, into the single office, right? Into the office of the papacy, and then just goes, how's that working out for you? That was, I think, rhetorically very powerful. What were your thoughts on that?
Well, that's true. We currently have a crisis, and I mean, I don't know if you saw this, but a few days ago, Carl Truman, who I have a lot of respect for, wrote an article in First Things, Why I'm Not Roman Catholic, and he points to Francis. Now, I'm sure he has other reasons too, but I mean, you can't deny that Francis is at the helm right now. and he's not doing some great things. He's doing some good things, but some, and I think the worst things he's done, and you might disagree with this, but the church had kind of got a second wind after Vatican II. Like after Vatican II, it was chaotic, but then we kind of got a second wind with JP2 and Pope Benedict, and that was like that was essentially the same papacy almost, because when JP2 was Pope Benedict was right-hand man, and then he became Pope, and everyone's like, okay, it's just a continuation of JP2. So I mean, the church seemed to catch a second wind, and we were on the long road to recovery, and so it was only a matter of time. But there was the light at the end of the tunnel. And Francis completely tore up that script.
I gotta show something first. So my Polish heritage, my crucifix, and I know in the Roman tradition, priests don't generally wear a crucifix, and in the Anglican tradition, we don't technically do it usually either, but I do. JP2 is one of the medallions. Yeah. So my Polish heritage, he's my favorite pope, definitely within my lifetime. But definitely one of my favorite popes in the past few centuries. So yeah,
he's certainly an interesting guy, and a lot more can be said about him, both positive and negative. But but like just getting back to Ubi's overall point, like that was the soundbite, and he actually elaborated a bit on Twitter afterwards about what he meant by that, what he was talking about specifically. And he was talking about the liturgical abuse.
Yeah.
And I don't know if he was talking about specifically suppressing the Latin Mass, but
that's what I thought he was saying. That's what I thought he was saying in his clarification. Yeah.
Okay. And I think he was talking about the abuses even during the Novus Ordo. Which it really bothers me that there's abuses that aren't cleaned up. Now, those abuses aren't everywhere. They happen to make it onto the internet. Like I can't remember. Father John Whiteford posted something yesterday, and something that happened during a Catholic Mass. And I'm like, I've never seen that in my life. I attended Novus Ordo for 30 years. I've never seen that.
Do you go TLM or do you go Eastern right now?
I go to
a Byzantine
TLM right now.
Okay. I will say this. I've seen one Novus Ordo Mass that was actually, I felt, one that was actually really, really reverent. It was actually Father Dwight Longenecker's parish in Greenville, which is about half an hour away from me. So
he's a convert from Anglicanism, right?
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, of course, I've not ever been to his, I don't follow his stuff too closely. Like, I know who he is, obviously. I don't follow him too closely, but, I've heard good things about him.
But yeah, so that was rhetorically the strongest point. I will say though, and Erick is quite the gentleman. I'd say probably a bit more than Ubi, at least just judging from the little I know about both of them. He could have shot back quite a bit, because I mean, the idea, one of the things I hate the most is when Eastern Orthodox pretend that they've got no problems of liberalism whatsoever. Like it's paradise on earth kind of thing with the Eastern Orthodox. I'm just like, guys, no, I mean, yeah.
Well, and or problems in general. Like the reason why, like in Canada and the States aren't Catholic countries. Well, I guess Canada, I think 40% on paper, obviously not in practice.
French,
on paper, I think 40% of our country is Catholic, but that's if you include the French part. If you include English only, it's similar to the United States, like between 20 and 25% Catholic. So it's not a majority, but it's a significant part of day-to-day life in America and English-speaking Canada. And because of that, you see the churches and the Protestant churches too, all their dirty laundry.
Yeah.
You don't see that from the Orthodox perspective because they like their presence in America and English speaking Canada or French speaking Canada for that matter is so incredibly small. It's like you can drive around for 12 hours and not see an Eastern Orthodox church. You'll see Catholic churches. You'll see a ton of Protestant churches, both evangelical and
Anglican and whatever. Yeah.
But and so I think they have that advantage that, like, if you go to Russia, the media is complaining about Kirill wearing a $20,000 watch, and they're constantly harping on them, and like you see all the dirty laundry there, and so that's why when you don't see in the West is people from Russia or Romania or Ukraine flaunting how great their church is, and saying you guys need to join the Orthodox Church, because they know back in their old country, they know all the problems that are not seen here. Like here, you just take a look at the news in Russia and you see Kirill or some other bishop in these, shiny vestments doing the censing. It's like, wow, what an amazing church, But so I think Eastern Orthodoxy has that advantage that since they're more of a regional church, you don't really see the problems unless you go to their countries.
Well, I mean, I'll give one example. I'm hearing the echo really loud now. It's yeah, I don't know what it is.
Okay, try now.
All right. Is it muted when you're not talking? Is that how it's working? Yeah, I don't hear anything at all.
Okay, I don't know the source of the echo. It could be coming off my mic and going into the speakers there.
That's probably what it's doing. Let me see if I can do echo cancellation. I have it on my side. Go ahead and check the audio on StreamYard settings. See if you can do settings on it.
Okay. Settings. Okay, audio. Reduce mic background noise.
Stuff like that, yeah. But mic background now, noise, echo cancellation, that sort of stuff.
Okay,
all
my
right.
speak. Wait, hold on. Okay, all right, say something now.
All right, see, yeah, it sounds perfect. I don't hear anything in the background.
I can't hear you.
Oh, you can't hear me. Okay. Well, go ahead and fix it, Yeah, I don't know what happened.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay, I cannot hear you.
Okay.
You may have changed your mic.
I haven't changed anything. Let's see. Can y'all all hear me?
Okay, try again.
All right. I mean, I'm talking. I'm going to ask, can you all hear me? Let me know if you can hear me out there. Allan can't, but anyone else? Can you hear me? Yeah, everyone else can hear me.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah. Whatever happened. Yeah, we can hear Allan also. We can hear Allan.
All right. Okay, they can hear me apparently. All
right, just undo whatever you did with the audio.
All right, I can hear you now.
Oh, okay. Okay, cool. That. All right. So back to what we were saying before. I mean, look at, I was even thinking of like the Russian Orthodox, but like the Russian Orthodox versus Greek Orthodox thing, that stuff over Ukraine, but just imagine if like Pope Francis baptized a sodomite couple their baby, right? That would cause massive scandal, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
But that what was it? One of the Greek archbishops or something like that did that a few years ago.
Yep, Elpidophoros, yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, you've got that sort of example, especially with the Greeks. You've got there was some metropolitan, I think, the Greek metropolitan in the United States who prayed at the DNC, like all sorts of stuff like
That
that,
was
right?
the same guy. That was Elpidophoros.
Oh, it was the same one. Oh, I thought he
Yeah.
was the metropolitan of the U.S. Okay, whoever then, and Bartholomew, what's his name? Is it Bartholomew II, the patriarch
of Constantinople? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he is the same, if not worse. Same as, if not worse than Francis, honestly. So like
Yeah,
the idea of at the same time, while it was rhetorically strong, I think it's a bit inconsistent because the Eastern Orthodox have their problems. That's my point, basically.
And when you think about it, though, that's not really to do with not really to do with the debate, in the 5th and 6th century. That just happened to be clipped by, I don't know if it was Jay Dyer or someone else, and it just got repeated and it's on there. And true, like we're going, like, look, no system, like Anglicans have problems, Orthodox have problems, Catholics have problems. So I mean, yeah, I mean, I'm sure. Oh, what's up, City of the Immaculata? I've collabed with him recently. Yeah. So, yeah, he's a good guy. Go subscribe to his channel because
but before we move on, one second, I just want to say hi to this. Thank you, Alonzo, for your concern. There was a little bit of cancer found again, so I got to go in for a procedure in January. But thankfully, it doesn't look aggressive at all. It's just sort of they just want to nip it in the bud, so to speak. But yeah, continue keeping me in prayer for that. But yeah, I didn't want to forget about it. But yeah, but my point with, again, just to reiterate and emphasize, it's rhetorically powerful. I don't think it was. If it's meant to just sort of be like, okay, yeah, there's this. The Roman Catholics often, many times will sort of argue that there's true unity when there's one single figure in charge and all that sort of stuff, with the powers and authority granted within the Roman communion. But then we see all this chaos. It's a rhetorical thing, right? It's not meant to be intellectually persuasive as much as rhetorically. Yeah.
As like emotionally persuasive, and that's not even technically the part of the debate. Is there an authoritative papacy? And I can't remember the exact wording, but is there a Vatican I or authoritative papacy in the 5th and 6th century? I think that was the official title of the debate. So I mean, if you have a pope clowning around in the 21st century, that really doesn't have anything to do with what's going on in the 5th and 6th century, because you've had, like, look, both of I think on my live stream with Trulia, like we're doing Q&A, and someone was talking about 2025, is there going to be a reunion at Nicaea or something like that? I mean, both churches have massive problems right now, Orthodox and Catholic, and they need to clean up their own stuff before we even begin to think about reunion. Like you have Second and Third Rome are out of communion. You have the two biggest Orthodox countries in the world killing each other en masse. Right now in Ukraine, which breaks my heart because I'm part Russian and part Ukrainian.
Oh wow.
Yeah, and like I talked to a girl I know. She's from Eastern Ukraine a few days ago. She's part Russian, part Ukrainian, and Ukrainians and Russians are brothers. That's the sad thing. Their language is very close, and they're both Orthodox, like you said. In Ukraine, you have a small Catholic population, but it's mainly Orthodox, and like. they're brothers in every way, really. But it's sad what's going on. So, but like, yeah. So I mean, both churches have huge problems right now. The Catholic ones might be a bit more obvious because, the Pope's in the Western media. The patriarchs aren't in the Western media. So, but
let's get into the meat of it too. Then also,
okay.
Almost yes. If you had anything else to say,
All right. So,
before we do that,
what do you think was Ubi's best point in regards to the like, yes, there's the soundbite about the modern church, but in terms of
the debate itself,
in terms of like the 5th and 6th centuries, what they were talking about, like what was the strongest point?
I think it's very important to point out, because what's often done, and not so much by Erick. I think Erick is a lot more careful on this, but especially if you get to like a level of just sort of lower tier Roman apologetics, they'll point to the language of like, Rome has never failed and never erred and all that sort of stuff, and then Ubi just goes through line after line of examples of like, okay, like they say this sort of thing all the time, and it's hyperbole. It's how they talk. Then we have our own versions of this,
Well, sorry.
Go on. But yeah, that I think was the best. It was an argument that sort of swept everything, or not everything, but like a wide array of arguments away from the more Roman side. But yeah.
Well, I think Erick actually had a pretty good response to that one. Like that was an Ubi cross-examination, right?
Okay. Well, it was not just there. He brought it in his initial statements, I think, and rebuttals and stuff. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, he's going. It's like he brings up Augustine. Is Augustine always you believed? And he brings up always. But I thought, like, because he asked him like about 10 things where they've used absolute language, but it's used as hyperbole, and like we could see where he was going. But I think Erick had a good response to that.
What was it?
I don't remember. His response was, okay, that's true, and of course, Ubi's argument was, okay, what about it's like, now that you've seen all this absolute language, why should we trust it when it talks about the Pope? And I think Erick's answer is pretty good, and it's the answer I would have gave as well. And it's like, okay, because he links it to a promise.
Oh, that's right.
He specifically linked to a promise from Christ, and I thought that was a pretty. And I don't think Ubi expected that, because he spent about 80% giving examples, and then he was going for the knockout punch. But I think Erick had a good response, and Ubi didn't know how to handle it. And before he could get a good counteroffensive going on Erick, the time of cross-ex had ended. So I think things ended on a positive note for Erick there. I think he had a pretty good response.
Yeah, I got you.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, that was a good response. It's I think the best one that can be given, but I still think I don't think it knocks it out, I would say.
Well, I think what you would say is that it what looked like Ubi's strong point. I thought there was like I know he was going for the ultimate soundbite there.
Yeah,
but I think Erick kind of stifled the soundbite with.
No. My point is that I like arguments that sort of deal with a wide array of I like rebuttals or counterpoints that deal with a wide array of arguments, kind of thing. And that's one of the ones I see the most common, is just this constant of like, well, look at the language that's being used about the Pope and all that sort of stuff. I'm like, well, you find that sort of stuff all the time in Alexandria.
About this bishop, that bishop, the emperor, a lot of people, that saint, so like I'm personally, and of course I'm more well-read than a lot of these, these keyboard warriors online. So like I know that fancy stuff is said about the Pope. So why should, I'm very careful. And I think what I would say is exactly the thing Erick said, is when they say positive things about the Pope. Sometimes, not all the times, they often tie it to Scripture. Like Pope Agatho, in Agatho's letter. I know this is 7th century. This is after the period, but Pope Agatho, when he's talking about his authority, he ties it to Scripture. He says he's like, he talks about Luke 22:32, and he talks about how he's strengthening the brethren. He was fulfilling that role to strengthen his brethren in Constantinople. And then he says, my predecessors have always done this. The predecessors of my littleness have always done this. So he's tying it to a promise from Christ. And there's like I know, and the way he uses Luke 22:32, if you go read it, it's almost identical to how Vatican I uses it in Pastor Aeternis.
Yeah.
And if you look at the document known as the Dictatus Papae, now I have a lot to say about that. That was never an official document. It's just a list of bullet points, probably for an archivist to go research. But it's got stuff in there Catholics don't believe in. I'm going to do a thing on this, a YouTube video. But in the Dictatus Papae, there's stuff we don't believe in, like the stuff with the imperial signia and the Pope's name being the only name in the world. Obviously, we don't believe in that. There's part of the Dictatus Papae. It says that the Pope has not erred or will not err, Scripture bearing witness. And the Scripture bearing witness, he's probably talking about Pope Agatho, because it says in there the papacy has not ever erred, and it will not ever err, and he links it to Luke 22:32. So I mean, so that's the big difference I see with some of the pro-papal language. I mean, there's some fluffy language that doesn't include it, but I think when the popes talk about their own power, they tend to back it up with, with Matthew 16, sometimes Luke 22, or sometimes John 21. Now, you can disagree with those quotations of Scripture, and I'm sure you do, but I think the difference is when flowery language is used of the Pope, they tend to back it up with Scripture. I noticed that's the difference, and that's why you should trust. That's why I think you can make a better case for the language about the Pope than you can about the language of stuff that Ubi brought up. And I think Erick. Yeah, sorry.
No, sorry. Finish your thought. Go ahead.
Well, I think Erick did a
good job
of countering that point.
All right. The other part I do think it goes with this is like the actions, and I don't know if you would agree with this part. I'd love to hear your thoughts, but like the actions of the councils and individuals and such, and various bishops seem to go against the idea of a Vatican I type papal supremacy and such. I mean, and that part can be argued of like, well, there's just an abuse of power either way kind of thing, from either perspective. You can point to like, well, there's abuse of power happening. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that point.
Are you talking specifically about Chalcedon or Constantinople 553? Because those are very
both
different,
honestly. So if you want to go through both,
yeah, okay, we'll start with Chalcedon. Okay, I like what Erick pointed out in the debate, where he said, we being the Catholic Church, we're not just a monarch. We have councils too. And in the second millennium, the millennium that everyone agrees there's papal supremacy in, we still have ecumenical councils. We still have Florence, Trent, Vatican II, where people are going back and forth, debating things, telling each other they're wrong. In fact, at the Trent, there was a body of a small body. I think Cardinal Pole was part of it. He was part of England. When the Catholics and Anglicans were in full scale war for that country. So, but Cardinal Pole was sympathetic to the doctrine of sola fide. And he was like, his opinion was, now I don't think he attended Trent, or at least not all of it, but people had his view. His view was in the Catholic Church. He was sympathetic to sola fide. And like, that was debated. And so there's this stuff in the second millennium. And I think Erick pointed out that if you read the Gasser's Reladio, the three examples he gives of papal supremacy are Constantinople 869, Council of Lyons, Second Lyons, and Florence. And these are councils, and he's giving them as examples of papal supremacy. So, I mean, we are, I don't like saying this word, but the Catholic Church is a conciliar church. I don't like the word because there's a version of conciliarism which was heretical and condemned in the 15th century. But we are conciliar too. A lot of people say, well, you know, the Orthodox are collegial and conciliar, and we're monarchical. No, we are conciliar too. And I think Erick pointed that out. Now, and I think Chalcedon is a point where I think it looks very similar to ecumenical councils in the second millennium, where no one will deny there's papal supremacy. You can question that in the 5th century. But I don't think, if you look at us as, yes, we got a monarch, but we're conciliar as well, it works perfect for Council of Chalcedon. So I don't think that's a problem. Now, Constantinople 553 is something else. I think, as a Catholic, I think this is the biggest problem in like if you're trying to find a silver bullet against the papacy in the first millennium, Constantinople 553 is the closest you'll get. I think, like for me, in the first millennium, like that ecumenical council does not look like a second millennium. It does not look like the rest of the first millennium councils. Actually, it looks very different. It does not look like a modern Orthodox council. People seem to forget that, because you're not having a politician who's deposing bishops left and right, who don't go along with the scheme, putting other bishops under house arrest. You know, it was just a very unfortunate. And I think sometimes when you look at the first millennium, this is how I would answer it. Now, it didn't necessarily come out like this in the debate, but this is how I would answer it. I would answer it that things looked a bit different in the first millennium in the combined church, because you had two monarchs in the church, in my opinion, the Pope and the Emperor, who was acting like, who was usurping a role he shouldn't have had.
The Byzantine Emperor, obviously.
Yeah. That's what I'm talking about. He
just for the audience. I'm just clarifying for the audience.
Yeah. And the thing is, if you follow Byzantine history post-schism, okay, like you got 1054. Constantinople falls in 1453, so 400 years, 399, but let's just round up. 400 years, and no one, if you follow the day-to-day affairs of the Byzantine Empire, which I have, because most people in that, they only know what's going on when they interact with the West. They only know what's going on, or Lyons, Florence, the Pope asking the Emperor asking the Pope to call the crusade. The average person, including apologists, only knows what's going on in the East when they interact with the West. Like what's going on in the Eastern Orthodox Church in 1120. Like, no one knows, right?
No.
I mean, I know because I've read all those medieval Byzantine documents, and you see the church is run by the emperor.
Mhm.
It's run by it's not collegial at all. Like, in fact, I'm going to do a thing on my channel sometime in the future to show that historically, in the second millennium, when we've split, the Catholic Church is more conciliar, again, the non-heretical conciliar, than the Orthodox Church overall. It might not appear that way in 2024, but if you go overall and look at the history of the second millennium, we have been more conciliar in the Catholic Church than they have been in the Orthodox Church.
Really quick, just for a clarification, would you explain the heresies from your perspective of conciliarism, like the sort of French conciliarism, versus what you're saying is proper conciliarism?
Okay, yeah, that's a great point. That's why I don't like the word conciliar, because it's the same and it could be mixed up. I prefer synodal, but Pope Francis is screwing up the word synodality, so I can't win. Okay, in the late medieval era, like if you go to say Pope Gregory VII to about 1300, you have a very authoritative papacy that can like depose monarchs and stuff, and there's this power struggle between kings and popes, and like it's not just Henry IV and Gregory VII. Like in England, like I think King John was excommunicated, right?
Yeah.
Wait,
was it? Yeah, he was excommunicated, and then he I think sold England or something like that to Rome or something like that. I can't remember.
Yeah, something like that. I can't remember all the details because of that.
Yeah.
For King John, I just remember his war with King Philip II of France, who was also excommunicated, right? Because he did not get his annulment with the Queen of, I think it was Queen of Denmark or something like that.
He should have started his own church. That's what he should have done.
He should have preempted Henry by 3 centuries. Yeah. So in the late, starting around 1300, in the monarchies of Europe, they start to get parliaments, like the Parliament in England, the Estates General in France, and so this trickles into theologians, and they're like, "Oh, we have a parliament. The Pope should have a parliament too." Now, the Pope has a college of bishops, which he uses, but the idea was, how much authority should that parliament have? And if you take a look at the Council of Constance is the one where people say kind of dabbled in the heretical conciliarism. It actually says in there that they need to hold councils every 5 years. Now that it's not an infallible decree, it's one of the council things that was changed. And for a while, they were actually doing that. They had a council not ecumenical, but 5 years after that, small one that no one's heard of, and one 5 years after that no one's heard of. And then they've abolished it. Then they're like, okay, we're not doing that anymore, because
seems pretty expensive.
Yeah, it does seem expensive, but Pope Francis seems to be doing that. There's talks about how the Vatican's always broke, and it's like, well, flying in these people and holding these all these synods aren't cheap. They're not free.
Just do it through Zoom.
Yeah, and so it basically tried to elevate the council to an authority it didn't have, or at least the Catholic Church claims it didn't have. And so you have to have a council every 5 years, or every 2 years, or every and of course, not everyone who was promoting conciliarism was saying the same thing. Like they weren't saying the exact same thing. There were several camps of conciliarism. So it's basically an imbalance between the popes and the council's power. Yeah. So yeah, I like this. I could do an entire show on, and I think conciliarism kind of reached its peak when you had the Great Western Schism, and you had two popes, and it was a council that fixed it, Council of Constance, and like it fixed it. And so they're like, oh, there we go. It wasn't the Pope that fixed it. It was a council. And that's where they kind of had their crowning moment. And they had about 30 years of victory. You know, like the Japanese had 100 days of victory after Pearl Harbor. You know, they had about 20, 30 years of victory. And then you had Florence, which completely crushes conciliarism. It didn't die immediately after that, but it was certainly on the decline after that. There's some lingering, a bit of lingering conciliarism by the time you get to the Reformation. Martin Luther, for a while, he kind of adopted a quasi-conciliarist view, but then like the problem he has, he says the Council of Constance was good because it gave the ecumenical council a lot more power than the Pope. But then he was countered on that by saying, oh, you're saying all this good stuff about John Hus, but that same council had John Hus condemned to death and endorsed King Sigismund burning him at the stake. And Martin Luther was like, he didn't really have an answer to that. And then at that point, he's like, well, I guess we can't trust the councils either. We can only trust the scripture. And that's the point where, in my opinion, Sola Scriptura was born. You may take issue with that interpretation. But anyway, I hope I haven't confused people with my description of conciliarism.
No. So what do you think was Ubi's strongest point? And then I'd love to hear what you think of Erick's strongest point as well.
Okay. I think I thought Ubi had a good rebuttal section. He did cut it short, which you probably shouldn't do because it makes it look like you don't really have anything. But I thought he did well responding to a lot of things that was in Erick's opening statement. He had that point about Pope Vigilius, where Belisarius had deposed his predecessor and put him on trial before.
Sorry, really quickly. Yeah, so I want to say I'd forgotten to mention this before. I do think that the strongest general argument for this era is Vigilius, far more than Honorius, obviously, and even better than sort of the points that are made about Chalcedon and, you know, especially the whole I judge thing. I mean, I think that's a good argument, don't get me wrong, but I think Vigilius is by far the strongest. Would you say that?
Oh yeah, like if you were going to look,
that's right. You did say that. That's right.
The entire 2,000 year history of the church. If you're gonna that's the toughest I have to deal with.
Yeah,
like I try not to deal with the papacy because I just find it a boring topic, to be honest. But I'm kind of an ecumenical council supremacist. You know, like I'm not a conciliarist. You know, again,
in that sense.
Version. Yeah. But I'm very pro ecumenical councils. I love ecumenical councils. And I think if you look at the 2,000 year history of the church, Pope Vigilius, if you want to say that a Vatican I view was not there, you can point at that. I think that your best argument, probably the second best argument, is it's not as high, but a notch below. The second best argument you'd have is the Council of Constantinople one, the Pope supposedly not being in communion with the rest, and the ecumenical council going on without him. Although, according to Erick and John Colarafi, there's some evidence that the Pope actually was in communion. Now, I've not gone into them myself. He's told me what primary sources to buy. I haven't bought it yet. But that's probably the second best. And like, apart from that, in my opinion, apart from that, those are the only two things that trouble me as a believer in Vatican I. Those are the only two things that trouble me. Like, the whole Stephen versus Cyprian thing does not trouble me at all. Pope Honorius doesn't really bother me at all. Photius doesn't really bother me at all. I think it's those two things, and specifically 553, which and that's why I think it was good that they brought that up. I think it was good that they debated this topic. I mean, I'm not troubled by Chalcedon, because and I think Erick rightly pointed out that we're not just a monarchical church. We have a conciliar body too, where people debate and disagree and all that stuff. And that's in the second millennium too, when no one denies there is papal supremacy. So I think he did a good job of pointing that. He pointed out Gasser's relatio, and the three big examples are councils. Yeah, and you've read Gasser's relatio, so you know that too.
It is interesting, and Ubi brought it up. Ubi did bring it up. It is interesting that Chalcedon was not one of the examples. I do find that interesting.
Well, yeah, I mean, I find that interesting too. But I mean, you don't have to cite it as an example for it to be an example. I mean, I think, I mean, like, it's not like he said these are the only examples, right? I mean, he could have gone for that. He just thought Constantinople 869, Council of Lyons, and Florence were better. And I think by citing these three, he is trying to target Eastern Orthodox critics, because Florence and Lyons were both reunion councils, right?
I will say, I do think one of the issues with that argument from Ybarra is that it's just as good of an argument against the historical, like the historicity of a papal supremacy, given the fact that the closest thing you can come to for arguments are within ecumenical councils, right? Rather than singular actions by the Bishop of Rome as the Pope.
Well, keep in mind, though, the debate focused around 1 century of, and like he talked about the formula of Hormisdas, and I mean, I thought he did a good job of presenting that. Maybe you don't think so. I don't know. And that was kind of like the whole Acacian schism. See, for me, I know there's a ton of issues with the formula of Hormisdas. There are things that Ubi pointed out. There are several versions of it. There's a debate about how much of the flowery language was there originally and how much it was, how stuff was added, you know, and Constantinople was kind of given an honorable mention and all that stuff. But what I use that for, what I use the formula of Hormisdas for, is basically conceding, the Eastern Greek bishops conceding that the papacy was correct all along in condemning Acacius. The Pope was right. All the East was entirely wrong on the issue of Acacius and the Henodicon, and the Pope was right. So basically, the only thing I use to like if I'm debating someone on this, the only thing I would use is that the formula of Hormisdas showed that the Pope was right all along, not some formula applying Matthew 16 to the Pope, saying he will not err.
Yeah.
I don't touch that. I would just say it just shows the popes were right all along. So that's what I would use it for. So I think that's
real quick, a clarifying question. Do you hold to essentially Vatican I being sort of found in germ form and sort of developing throughout the first millennium?
No,
because I would say okay, go ahead.
No, I'll explain my position. I believe Vatican I was there. Where I do think it looked a bit different is because you have a second monarch who did not have authority from Christ, who kind of usurped it. The church kind of accepted it. Like when Constantine converts in the 4th century, that was a huge bonus for the church. That was amazing.
Yeah.
The most powerful man in the world converts to your faith, and it's accepted in the Roman Empire now. And Constantine had a very healthy view of his role in the church. He was at the Council of Nicaea. He just said, all right, you guys tell me what to do, and I'll publish it as a decree. It was a very healthy thing. But over time, the emperors start to get their claws more and more in. And in the 1st century, especially during the era of the ecumenical councils, Pope Vigilius is an example of massive overreach. Not Pope Vigilius, Justinian is an example of massive overreach. And so I don't think it was there in seed form. I think it looked a bit different because it's clouded by the fact there was a second monarch, and that was the Roman emperor. And you don't realize this until you study the post-schism Greek church for 4 centuries, which no one has done apart from me, as all the apologists I know. Like it got so bad. I'm sure you've seen me use the quote before. Patriarch Anthony IV. Russia wanted to take the emperor out of their liturgical diptychs because at that point the Roman emperor was a city-state, a vassal of the Turkish Islamic Empire. It's not an empire; it's a city-state. And then you have Patriarch Anthony IV writing to the Prince of Moscow, I think it was Vasily, and he's telling him, you can't have a church without an emperor. That's what he's saying. He's saying you can't have a church without an emperor or an empire. Of course, 50 years later, the empire falls, so they had to reassess things, and Moscow becomes the third Rome, right?
And I don't even know how you can defend that historically, because the church didn't start within an empire.
You got 3 centuries until I know, but I mean that's how much it creeped into their thoughts. So I mean, if you take a look and keep in mind, in the first millennium, the Pope, he had a tiny bit of political power. The Pope, in the 4th and 5th century, the Pope was like the mayor of Rome, essentially. It was kind of funny, actually. But he didn't have near what the emperor had, let alone Justinian. They controlled the troops. And usually when people oppose the papacy, they'll say, oh, look, he didn't get what he wanted over there. It's like, well, yeah, because you had an autocrat who had troops behind him. They talk about how in Council of Nicaea too, he didn't get those lands back. And it's like, yeah, because there were Roman troops there at the request of the emperor, and he could do what he wanted. So, I mean, the fact that you had a second monarch in the church, you had the Pope, and you had this other monarch who is technically just a layman when you think about it. But he has a lot of power as a layman, including in the church. So, I mean, that's why it looks a bit different. I know the argument that's made, but if you take that into account, I think it has powerful explanatory scope. That's my opinion.
Okay. So I want to know your opinion on this. I don't think Pastor Eternus and especially the Relatio gassers allow for a sort of seed form understanding. Would you agree on
Okay.
that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Just to point that out, because I know a lot of people really push heavily on that sort of thing.
Oh, I don't.
But
Yeah.
And I'm talking obviously as much to the audience as I am to you and all that. So I just like to point those things out. With what do you think as far as at least on Erick's side? He could have done, and again, I don't know how I'm not close with Erick, but I've had like one video with him, and that was on your, it was on your channel.
Yeah,
that was on your channel. Yeah.
By the way, subscribe to my channel, everyone. Allan Ruhl. Yeah. So.
Yeah. See the ticker at the bottom. Yeah. I've had great respect for him. I've had like 2 conversations with him. Once on He Who Must Not Be Name's Reason and Theology channel. I called in
anymore.
I know it's called like the Michael Lofton Show or whatever. It sounds like a late night comedy show or something, which yeah. But
no comment.
He's actually he hasn't touched the debate, interestingly enough. I mean, I wouldn't expect him to have, but yeah. But anyway, I like 4 years ago I called in and Erick and I had a sort of impromptu discussion about holy orders within the Anglican tradition. And then on your channel, he and I have had talk. So I don't pretend to like know him or talk with him or anything, but like I've had great respect for him. I think he's a great, very thoughtful mind and intelligent on the Roman side. But what did you have any issues with what he argued or how he argued?
I think for the most part he presented it well, and he presented it like as I said before, I'm happy with the presentation that came from my side. I mean, if you think Ubi won, you can think that, but I'm not going to go claim victory for Erick, but I'm going to say I thought he presented and argued very well. And he argued in a way that I would argue in that we don't just have a monarch, we're conciliar as well. So
no, I get you on that. I think that one of the issues I had with Ubi is especially towards the end. Now, I don't think it was completely unwarranted, but I felt that Ubi was getting more unnecessarily aggressive towards the end, especially at the end of the discussion, you know?
Why do you think that was? I noticed that too, but why do you think that was?
Well, I'm trying to remember what it was over exactly. He sort of accused Ybarra of like going around in circles kind of thing. I remember.
Well, I think Ubi was trying to like steer the conversation in a certain direction, and Erick wasn't letting go there. Yeah, again, it's been a while since I watched the debate. I watched it like a week and a half ago, you know. Like I watched it the day it happened, and then I rewatched it again as I was I think I was doing some writing. I had it in the background.
I watched it in pieces. I watched a little bit of it in the live stream time, but this, I mean, those who know the liturgical calendar, I don't know if it's like this in the newer calendar, but at least in the pre-Vatican II calendar for us, it's you've got the Vigil for the Nativity, then you've got Christmas Day, then you got Saint Stephen, Saint John, Holy Innocents, and then we've got first Sunday after Christmas right after in a row kind of thing. And I have to get ready for a Lessons and Carols this Saturday, as well as St. Thomas this Saturday, and then of course the fourth Sunday in Advent. So my schedule has been completely like busy. So I've been just listening to it as I can, which is why you've been leading the conversation about this and all. And
keep in mind, I think we should acknowledge I had to get up pretty early for this. I had to get up like before 6 a.m. You know, it's only 7:50 here. We've been going for almost an hour and a half.
Yeah. So if you have to get going, that's fine.
No, I don't need to get going. My work schedule is a bit different than it was with the nature. I'm no longer in oil and gas, at least for the time being. I'm doing political consulting now.
Oh wow,
Yeah.
interesting.
So like, yeah,
For
no, I've
Trudeau?
been a camp. No, but
Oh,
I'm
talk a little bit about, if you don't mind, talk a little bit about Canadian politics, like we were doing before the live stream, if you want.
well. I mean, sorry, not Pierre. Justin Trudeau has been unpopular for a while.
Mhm.
I think it kind of reached a height in the pandemic.
Mhm.
But then it kind of cooled off, but then it slowly built back. And now people like his finance minister, like the finance minister is like the second highest position, third highest position in the entire cabinet.
Mhm.
She resigned because she's
Oh
trying
wow.
to jump off the sinking ship. And she resigned right before he was about to throw her under the bus. So she kind of preempted that, but she realizes now that she could potentially run for the leadership at, as soon as he's gone. About 60 members of parliament have openly, like in his own party. Now he's only got 150 members of parliament in his government. About 60 of them publicly, they're still some in private, but have come out and demanded his resignation. That's 40% of his government, his own government, let alone the conservatives, right?
Yeah.
Jagmeet Singh, who's the leader of the NDP, a far left party that's propping Trudeau up because Trudeau doesn't have a majority; he's got a minority. He's being propped up, and of course, Jagmeet's threatening to pull the plug, but he's been threatening that for like 6 months, and he hasn't. He's just trying to rattle his saber.
Yeah.
And I think the next election will see the end of Jagmeet Singh as well. He's trying to hold on because if you're a member of parliament 6 years, you get a pension, and it's a full pension. And I think in parliament they make 200,000 a year, so your pension is 200,000
Oh wow.
a year. It is a
Wow.
nice pension. And so he's trying to hang on, but you have to get 6 years. And he was first elected in 2019, so he's October 2019. So he's trying to extend till October next fall so he can get his pension. And that's why if you go online, they call him Pension Singh, because they like he's working for him and his wife. He's not working for the people,
Canada.
and he's going to get clobbered in the next election as well. He's going to go down as bad as Trudeau. And the conservatives are, I mean, barring some sort of miracle, the conservatives are going to clean up. And believe it or not, I'm not the hugest fan of Ben Shapiro, but last night he published a video about the Canadian Conservatives. Pierre Poilievre who's the leader. It's hilarious trying to see Americans pronounce his name. I guess it's like when Canadians try to pronounce Spanish names. We kind of sound like idiots. That's what you guys sound like with French names.
Nice.
Because I mean, I don't think there's a lot of French people in the States, right? You got some down in Louisiana, but
that's about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, we obviously French-ish people, French descendants and all that sort of stuff all over,
Yeah.
but like a culturally French place is just basically Louisiana, and that's about it.
Yeah.
Maybe small pockets elsewhere, but yeah.
Yeah. I've always wanted to go to Louisiana. Apparently, in the Catholic cathedral there, this is according to Taylor Marshall. I don't know if it's true or not, but apparently they've been doing the Latin Mass nonstop since the 60s in their cathedral.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so like they've just continually I don't know if it's the main mass, but they do a Latin Mass. I think their cathedral's called St. Patrick's, and they've done that every Sunday since Vatican II. They didn't stop, and the bishops haven't cracked down on it or anything.
Oh wow.
Yeah, no, it's
Getting back to the papacy thing, I think that's one of the things that makes it hard for me to call the papacy the sort of the ecclesiastical system of the papacy, especially post Vatican I. Although you see this before, but like as conciliar, and just because like maybe if I'm misunderstanding how this works, please sort of tell me. But whatever you think of Father Frank Pavone, like it was the papacy, the Pope, who laicized him, right?
Well, like if a priest is being laicized, like sometimes they can apply for laicization. That didn't happen in his case. He was
obviously
defrocked. And I don't think it was the papacy. I thought it was a body. There's like a body of people, like appointed by the curia, obviously, who's in charge of that. Because if you're priest and you're going to layman, that has to be done. That's done through the Vatican. I don't know if the Pope was personally involved, but
it's coming from the Vatican is my point. Like rather than the local
if you're
diocese.
going to look at France's overreach of power, that's probably the last place I'd go. There's way better examples of his overreach of power than Frank.
I actually have a few different ones. The problem is like the idea of, I mean, yes, it's a Western patriarchate, right? But still, like the idea of like the patriarch of the West going into a diocese that is literally thousands of miles away over an entire ocean for a priest in one particular diocese and being able to defrock him, that's the issue that I'm getting at. But also then look at like Bishop Strickland, and I still don't know what the details of that are. I don't know if anything has come out recently, but like that seems to me just two examples of like it's hard to look at this as like conciliars and without recourse, like
I've got an answer to this. I believe that what Francis is doing right now is a massive abuse of power. He's gone beyond Vatican I, I think. And that's a problem. And I mean, it's a shame we're talking about this because it's a whole discussion in itself. If you want me to come back and talk about this, I think this Pope is massively overreaching his power. And I think the perfect examples of papal power that I'm comfortable with are Florence and Trent. Around the time of Florence and Trent, things were going perfectly then. You had the problem with the Gallicans and and stuff like that. But I mean, how the popes acted, I think, was perfect then. And I think since Vatican II, for the most part, they haven't been bad, except Francis. I mean, I don't recall John Paul II or B16 massively overreaching.
Would you say that JP2's treatment of Lefebvre was overreaching?
No.
Okay.
No,
I was just curious about that.
No, I mean, Archbishop Lefebvre clearly violated canon law. He was told that several times. And he knew he was going to get excommunicated. He just
didn't care.
He thought he could, because prior to his excommunication, like prior to the consecration of the bishops, he was still fighting the modernism from the debatable from the council, what he thought was from the council, long before he was excommunicated. Like all throughout the 70s and 80s, he was trying to combat the modernism. And in fact, people that were also trying to combat the modernism, but were not as extreme as Lefebvre. Inside the church, we're saying, Lefebvre, don't do this, because if you do this, you're excommunicated, and you're considered the fringe, because the fringe you can always dismiss. But if the fringe is gone, now we become the fringe, and then they're just going to ignore us. They have to pay attention to us while you're still here, if that makes sense. So, and this is a very good topic. Like this topic could be its own stream. In fact,
I just wanted a side comment about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just want a side comment about it.
Yeah. In fact, if you want, I'll come back and do a stream on this, because I think this is an important issue. But I think the Pope right now, I think you're absolutely right. He is overstepping Vatican I authority. Like I do believe in churches having a certain amount of autonomy. Now, the problem is if you give them too much autonomy, they start doing weird things like they're doing in Germany right now with their synodal way. Now, of course, Pope Francis does, like, he'll give some very limp-wristed condemnations about them and do absolutely nothing. They're disobeying him left, right, and center. I mean, now I think he's trying to wait them out, because I think this thing has a timeline on it. Because once the older bishops die off, like the young clergy in Germany are conservative, but he's not going to see that day. Pope Francis is, I think, 88. He just had his birthday. He's 88 years old. He's not in good health. He's pushed around in a wheelchair. You know, so I don't think he's going to see the end of it. I mean, we might, because we're both in our 30s, but we could see the end of it, but he's not going to. So I think he's hoping the problem solves itself, and it might. But see, the thing is, a lot of people, like a lot of thoughtful critics against the papacy, not people that just want to score points, but thoughtful critics, rightly say, well, okay, you got problem X over there. Why doesn't the Pope just solve it? And I don't think that's a great criticism. Like, it sounds good, but a lot of these problems solve themselves in the end, and like they're constantly changing. Like, if you ever took a look at the whole thing with the Hussites in the 15th century, that movement was splintering and constantly changing and stuff. People couldn't keep up with it. As soon as John Huss died, that thing like splintered into a million, not a million, but probably half a dozen movements. And they started getting, like, they declared the Roman Rite invalid at one point. And like they were just getting, And so things in church history, remember, are slow. Like, how long did it take to deal with his monophysites? Like, the problems that Chalcedon birthed are technically still today. That schism hasn't been healed. There's like the Coptic, the Armenians, Ethiopians. I talked to an Ethiopian the other day, whose wife, he's Catholic, his wife is Oriental Orthodox. They like it takes centuries to solve that problem, and I think like you had two more ecumenical councils dealing with the monophysite controversy, which technically existed pre-Chalcedon. And it took 2.5 centuries to solve, and probably would have continued having ecumenical councils over if the Islamic Empire had not conquered the monophysite regions of the Roman Empire. Like, technically, by the time you get to the year 700, it's only Catholic / Orthodox in the Byzantine Empire. You don't really have the monophysites anymore. Maybe a few Armenian populations scattered here and there, but overall, you don't have the Copts, you don't have the Syriacs. So like, it takes time to solve problems in church in church history, and so I think it's understandable, but I think kind of unfair where people's like, okay, problem in Germany, solve it now. You know, it's like, I don't, So that's what I think. So,
so I actually do have to get going, because speaking of those things, I still have to finish up the typing for the handout, the bulletin, brochure, whatever, for lessons and carols. I got to get that printed out today. Give your sort of final summary of let's do this. I mean, we kind of just do a quick, really short summary, and then there are probably going to be a lot of people who are looking into, say, Eastern Orthodoxy or Roman Catholicism or Anglicanism or whatever, right? What do you recommend as far as trying to find out the truth, other than just submit to Rome because Rome is the truth?
Because Rome is Rome. Okay. My final thoughts on the debate were, I think it's a great debate, but I don't think people will change sides because of that debate. I don't think anyone is going to, Catholic or Orthodox or Anglican, is going to say that debate is, now I have to switch sides. I don't think they will.
What let me ask this. The people who are, like I was just talking about before, the ones who are searching, who are maybe evangelical background, how much do you think that this debate influences them?
Well, I think evangelicalism, like in the States, like the States is the main evangelical country in the world.
Yeah.
I know there's evangelicals outside the States, but they're often planted by Americans going to their countries, and
so they're very Americanized.
Yeah. So I think they're on the decline. They've passed their prime. Now it's going to take probably 150 years for them to eventually die off. But so if you're so that's well beyond our lifetime. But if you're an evangelical searching, I don't think your opinion would be changed by that debate. I think it might attract you more to the Catholic Orthodox because it's showing that they're both historical, that in the 5th and 6th century there was a pope. Yeah, his authorities debated, but they had also ecumenical councils, like and so that's something too. Popes, ecumenical councils. I think that'll attract you to Catholic and Orthodoxy, but I don't think that debate will give you the answer between the two. And I think I think you just got to do that on your own. And I would say stay off the hysteria, stay off the internet. There's a lot of bad players on both sides, Catholic and Orthodox. I'm not going to name them, but I think Father James, who I'm talking about. I saw you in. I saw you interacting with a Catholic the other day. I'll tell you after the stream. It's kind of funny. But no, I would just pray about it. And keep in mind, church government is not the only thing. Yeah, it's important, but it's not the only thing that you have to look into if you're deciding what to do. You got to look into the theology. You got to look in the spiritual life. You got to look at the saints of each church. I mean, it's not the only thing. We tend to boil the difference down to the papacy, and that's obviously the biggest physical difference. But keep in mind, it was not the big difference in 1054. And I did some stuff on that recently. But yeah, so yes, take a look at this issue, but take a look at other issues as well. Because keep in mind, your spiritual life is not going to revolve around some guy in Rome or some guy in Moscow or Constantinople. So that's what I would say. Look at this issue, but look beyond it as well, and try to not get caught up in these shallow debates on X or Facebook or whatever. Anyway, that's all I have to say.
Any book recommendations that you have in relation to this?
I'm not really reading books about the papacy now. I'm reading. I'll show you the book I just finished yesterday. Just pause for a second. I just finished
Simmons' book. I do recommend. I do recommend Simmons' book.
Okay.
It's called The Church Universal and the See of Rome.
Yeah, I've got I guess if you want, I've always plugged the Jallan book in the past. He's an Anglican, and the thing is, he kind of gives a kind of fresher view on the whole thing. because it's weird. Like an Anglican takes like he talks about the Photian schism. The Photian schism is kind of shrouded in Catholic Orthodox polemics, but an Anglican can kind of move outside that and kind of give a third party view. So it's kind of refreshing, actually. A book that I just finished, History of the Archbishops of Hamburg / Bremen by Adam of Bremen. Gavin Ortland's talked about this book.
Okay.
And it's about basically the evangelization, like this is like 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th century. I know he lived I think he dies in like 1080. He was born around 1040, 1050, and he kind of gives a history of how Northern Europe is Christianized. That's what I've read recently. Like I'm not reading about the papal apologetics too much these days. I'm reading about our stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would there's been a popular sort of Protestant or evangelical talking point. I don't say that in a necessarily derogatory sense of just saying like, hey, look, I don't think that you need to be diving into like near PhD level sort of studies of history to find out the true church, and there is a sense of there's an appreciation for a sense of simplicity and sort of discovering the true faith kind of thing. And that's actually one of the things that attracted me to Anglicanism, is that I felt like I could take church history seriously, and at the same time recognize that it's complicated, and that you don't need to have all of the answers figured out on church history in order to be part of the true faith. I guess that's sort of my conclusion with it.
Yeah, no, that's like you don't have to read church history. So you're saying you don't have to read it in kind of like apologetics mode. You can just read it. And like that's how I've kind of started to read it too, even though I do believe in Vatican I. I do believe in ecumenical council authority. But
my position, I'm more easily able to just be like, okay, that's clearly politics is being played. I don't need to sort of take and not that you guys would deny that necessarily, but yeah, go ahead.
I want to share something with you. I've not shared this online before, but one of the reasons I focus on the medieval and not the early church is because I find the Chalcedon, like Tome of Leo, small c Catholic view versus the monophysites to be so depressing. I just church spent 200-300 years on this, trying to solve it every way we can by theological treaties on both sides, by crazy ecumenical councils like 553, and it technically didn't get solved because we like I'm not saying I'm not these modern people that say, oh, we believe the same thing all along, just in different language. No, that's wrong too. But the fact that we couldn't solve this, and I don't know, and like just think, if you lived in the year 500, what if you're a Chalcedonian or a monophysite, you essentially have your life the same way. Like you go to church, you believe in the Trinity, you believe in Christ and his efficacious power, you believe in the sacraments, you believe in like all the same things. It's just that you're divided between a very esoteric view of Christology that the average person doesn't know about. The average guy in the pews doesn't know, but the priest might know. But both people were still going to church. They still love God just as much. And so the whole thing I find very depressing, not just because it's a schism, but and so like by the time you get to like the 8th or 9th century, there's there's still internal arguments, but not about Christology, which I think is too depressed. This is the first time I've ever said this online, so take it what you will. But
and you're not saying this, but we both think that monophysitism is a serious error, heresy. And especially because it sort of has to deny classical theism. I would say that's one of the biggest issues.
Is that I mean, I won't go that far, but I'm not a theologian, so I don't feel qualified to talk about that.
I just don't see how it can be consistent with classical theism in any way. But yeah. So one more question, if you don't mind, and then we got to get going.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
All right. So this has been one of the, and this is slightly more polemical, so I apologize. But one of the issues I've always sort of had with a lot of defenses or arguments, actually, positive arguments for the papacy, is this idea of like, will you get true unity with the papacy, right? I guess, though, when I'm studying church history, it's so difficult to see the papacy as being something that's unifying. It's so often just dividing. Do you agree with that assessment? And then what are your thoughts on that based on what I just said?
I got a question. Have you ever seen me use the unity argument?
No, I don't think you have. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, if I had to say, are we more unified than the Orthodox or Protestants? I would say yes, but we have massive problems, and I would not try to attract an Anglican like you or an Orthodox or even an evangelical with the unity argument, because I mean, to a certain extent, we're all bound by the same thing. We're all bound by the same thing, but and like, I'm not even talking about Pope Francis. This goes pre-Francis. Of course, Francis has only poured gasoline on the fire. But pre-Francis, even there's like a lot of issues. We're all in one body. That's true. But there's problems with catechesis, there's problems with politics, and there's cultural problems too. Like, a Catholic in, like, say, Poland versus Africa, just I don't know. Like, I've not ever used the unity argument, and I've not ever used the argument that the system works the best either. I mean, I do think it works better than its competing systems, but it does have problems. It does have problems, and I think it's legit for people like you to point them out, and Catholics, we should acknowledge that. It's like, look, like, but we should also try to explain that, look, there's been problems throughout history, and everyone has had it. Long story short, I would not use the unity argument. For the papacy, I'll just say that much. But I do think you brought up a lot of good things in this stream, that a lot of them deserve its own stream. So if you want to have me back for,
I'd love, obviously,
because there's some good things you brought up. So that's what I would say. And
all right, all right. My final thoughts. I think it's a good debate. That unity issues is one of the things I will say, though, to support the Roman side. I don't think that a mere sort of pragmatic approach to these sorts of things is wise. Because if the papacy is true, it could be the most inefficient thing in the world. It doesn't matter because it's true, right? So it ultimately has to rest on the question of whether or not the papacy, as understood by Vatican I, is true or not. Deciding, right? So, and I will say this one thing that I've noticed with a lot of converts to a variety of traditions, and this is for all the people who are looking at switching traditions based on sort of newfound knowledge for you, make sure that you take the claims of that tradition, especially the claims that they demand that you believe. Make sure that you take them seriously. I have a friend who recently became Eastern Orthodox, and I won't give the name or anything, obviously, but I love and respect him. He's a great brother, but it saddens me that it's at least how it looks. He seems to be holding to a lot of the essentials that he held to within Anglicanism that is now an Eastern that you can't hold to an Eastern Orthodoxy. So he's kind of picking and choosing, right? So like he rejects the exclusivity of the Eastern Orthodox. Like, you know, if you are outside of the canonical jurisdictional boundaries, then you're outside the church. Which that's one of the reasons I didn't become Eastern Orthodox, right? But like,
I know,
you know, there was a lot I love.
Big beef.
Yeah, and so like if you're convinced of that, sure, right? Then you know, do what you're convinced of, right? What you believe is true. But like, don't be like, well, I'm going to become Anglican or Lutheran or Roman Catholic or Eastern Orthodox, and I'm just going to pick and choose what I like that they demand I believe, right? I cannot abide that. I would rather have a faithful Roman Catholic who holds to all of the claims of Rome over a Roman Catholic who is just like, oh, well, we all just believe the same thing, and you know, it doesn't quite matter. I hate that. I just hate that with a passion. Take seriously the tradition that you're about to enter into. Yeah, that's my sort of final note.
Yeah. Well, for people born, like I think one difference between us is that I'm in the church I was born into, whereas you converted to your tradition. For the vast majority of the people who are born into the tradition, I think, stay in their tradition. Like if you go to a place like the Philippines, probably 85% Catholic, I'm guessing. Like if you take a look at the Catholics there, you know, you've got, you know, a core that are true believers, believe in everything, and then you have some kind of cultural, oh yeah, the evangelicals are my brother, the Muslims here in the Philippines are my brother, I'm going to see them both in heaven. But like that's not someone who takes their faith seriously. But I mean, it's in all traditions, you know, with the you know, I'm sure if you go to some Anglican countries, it's the same way, right? Or Lutheran. So
well, I mean, look at the Church of England and look at Canada. Like you've got like the liberalism that's an epidemic in there, and the Episcopal Church in the United States.
But for people that convert, like people that convert, like apart from, you know, apart from converting for marriage, people that convert are often very sincere in their faith, and that's what you're saying. They're searching for truth. Like you searched out Anglican, you looked at the Orthodox, I think you looked at the Catholics too, and it's like, well, I think Anglican's the best choice. Like and that's, you know, like all the converts, you know, and so if you're going to be serious about it, take the claim seriously. And like I like that. Like I just like talking about the monophysites, you know, now people will, like Catholics and Orthodox have like agreements with the monophysites, like non-official, but you know, they've gotten together and say, oh, we just believe the same thing. We just use different language. No, don't say that. That's insulting to the ancient saints on both sides who were smart enough to know the difference. There was a difference. I don't think it was a huge difference, but it was a difference. So like I kind of like what you're saying, like be honest with the claims, not just on papacy, but on Christology, sacraments, and like all the
ecclesiology, etc.
So
all right, well, thank you again, Allan. Check out his channel, Allan Ruhl. It's just called Allan Ruhl, right? I think.
Yeah, there's nothing fancy there.
All right. There is a link to the debate. We didn't show any clips. I'll try to remember to put in the show notes a link to your channel as well, but it's Allan Ruhl. So check it out. Like this video. I always forget to say that. And thank you all for watching. We had a decent size crowd for my channel, especially given that's in the morning. So thank you all for showing up. I really appreciate it. And thanks for all the questions and comments. I had no flat earthers. You should check out my part of my stream. What was it, a week or two ago with the atheist? I had this really weird conspiracy theorist guy towards the very end. Just spouting gibberish, and I did like the internet is just a wild ride. I love it.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, you can find an audience for whatever you're believing. Sadly.
Yeah. That's true. All right. Yeah. Again, thank you very much, Allan, and hope you all have a good and blessed Advent. And make sure you get yourself to Mass for St. Thomas. Obviously, the Sundays as well. But St. Thomas this Saturday, Christmas Day, not just Christmas Eve, St. Stephen, St. John, and Holy Innocents. But yeah, peace.
Peace.